either, and I'll ask Daniele because.
Yes, I think I do.
Oh no, yes, it's the three dots. Okay, so if who started the recording?
I did.
I think it started.
Okay, yeah, perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to go check in the support channel if there's anybody that's trying to get to the BCG room and is lost.
Shall we start? Kate?
Yes, there is one girl that can't find
Okay.
her room, but I need to check where she's supposed to be, actually. This is not going to be easy.
Do you need me to help?
I think we can give it 2 more minutes and then we can start.
Okay, cool.
Kate, because for example, I had problem with the canals, and when I left Microsoft Teams and then logged in again, it helped. So maybe then she will be able to do this.
We are supposed to be 26, we are 18 now.
We also saw some a bit less people than supposed to be, so it's fine.
So shall we start in the meantime with the introductions while we wait? Okay, go ahead, Julia.
So, good afternoon, everyone. It's my greatest pleasure to introduce you the speaker of this module. So, welcome to Fabio Cancarè. Fabio Cancarè is a Boston Consulting Group Associate Director focusing on climate actions. He has an extensive experience with energy transition levels applied to both energy and industrial customers. So, I leave the floor to Kate to continue the introduction. Kate, you're muted.
I was on mute. You never learn. So very quickly, workshop description. So BCG's 3 ways to create climate impact are: number 1, reducing their own footprint by implementing new ways of working to reduce travel. Number 2, supporting clients in various industries across the globe shape their climate vision. And number 3, engaging with international climate coalitions to advance knowledge and foster collaboration. And in this presentation, they will provide, Fabio, an overview of the key initiatives and projects that they pursue. But a very quick note, is that BCG, as you guys know, is the technical partner of the international session. And we met BCG a lot of months ago, and they were really one of the first people to really believe in the mission of the session and encourage us to achieve our objectives. So just to say that this is a very, very special moment for us, because they were really amazing partners that helped us not only on a technical level, but also on a human stance. So really enjoy this moment, because they can teach us so much, and they're just such humble people that I think you will enjoy this workshop as much as we have enjoyed working with them throughout the months. So I'll leave the floor to Fabio.
Really, thanks a lot, Julia and Caterina, for the very nice introduction, and welcome everyone to this workshop. So let's say I titled it "Protecting Our Planet" because this is, let's say, the end goal that we all aim to. Let me, maybe before entering into our climate action, let me maybe very quickly introduce who is BCG and what is our purpose, because possibly not all of you are, let's say, aware of our company. So let me start from the purpose, which is unlock the potential of those who advance the world. That to us basically is translated into collaborating, supporting, and partnering with companies as well as government and other institutions in order to really, let's say, push the effort to advance the world together with them. Just a few numbers on the right-hand side of this page. Let's say the most important for this session is definitely, let's say, the number of social impact projects that we conducted in 2020, almost 1,000. It's extremely relevant also, and let's discuss briefly our worldwide presence, because let's say we have 90 plus offices spread over 50 plus countries. So let's say we really operate all over the world, literally. And of course, let's say we are proud to work with the largest corporations, and we are proud to say that, let's say, our work is not a one-off work, but it's really more long-term collaboration with our partners. So as you can see, 90% of basically our business is coming from, say, companies and institutions that we work with in, let's say, in the past years. So they are not new customers, they are, let's say, partners with which we continue to collaborate all over the years. At the moment, let's say, if I have to describe a little bit our core business, of course, let's say we are a strategic consulting firm, but we are, let's say, pushing a lot two topics, I would say. The first one is digital, and let's say, if I have to look at the revenues, it's the most important topic, as you can imagine, because let's say all the companies are really wanting to digitalize their business, and let's say that there are big differences across the world, and so let's say we are still pushing a lot the topic of digital with our partners. But let me say that the second and most important to me, and I believe that is going to be, let's say, the first topic in 1 year or two at most, is sustainability. And in sustainability, we have created a center that is called Center for Climate and Sustainability. And through this center, as you will see in the following pages, we are pushing climate actions, let's say, inside BCG and within our, I will say, clients. But also, as Caterina introduced, we are also, let's say, collaborating and try to shaping the topic to advance the thinking in sustainability. Let me very quickly share a few bullets on our people. So people, as you can imagine, for a consulting company, are the most important resource by far. So let's say by far more than our tools, by far more than our knowledge, because let's say in the very end, people are let's say are pushing projects and are supporting, let's say, our partners to really push the thinking forward. So we are very proud to have within our people, let's say, professionals with a very different international background, with the most diverse degrees. So actually, I'm a computer engineering. I work with colleagues that have, let's say, a master in philosophy. Of course, as you can imagine, there are a lot of people with an economic background, but let's say the idea and let's say our willingness is to really, let's say, make the company as let's say as inclusive as possible, and so to really try to capture all different backgrounds. We do, let's say, hire people directly from the academia, but I will say that most of the people that are working in BCG also have, let's say, a previous management experience, and so they join not directly from the academia, but maybe after a few years of experience in other companies. We do push a lot, let's say, the work within other offices. So whenever, let's say, we join BCG, we are assigned to a reference office. Like, for example, in my case, I'm assigned to the Milan office. But we do work with other offices, and we do also, let's say, cross-office staffing, meaning that for the duration of a project, we relocate to another country, to another office in order, let's say, to carry out project work from there. We do push also multicultural and multinational teams. And here, let me share that I'm really proud of be part of a system that is called IGTI, meaning Italy, Greece, Turkey, and Israel. So if you think about these 4 countries, let's say it's really hard to me to find, let's say, a system with a more diverse cultural background. Yet, let's say, we are really one system, and let's say we are very often staffing projects, including, let's say, people from the 2 Italian offices, so Milan and Rome, but also people from Athens, from Tel Aviv, and from Istanbul. So it's really one team. And last but not least, we have, let's say, we are really strongly committed to sustainability. So, let's say we are doing as anticipated, we are walking the talk. So, let's say we are working on internal sustainability, but we are also partnering with the institutions and customers in order, let's say, to push the sustainability topic elsewhere. Let me quickly share with you our sustainability strategy. Actually, the 2020 sustainability report will be published in a couple of days. If I recall it correctly, it should be April 27. But these are, let's say, the 4 pillars of our strategy that we created a long time ago. As I said, today we are going to focus on the protecting our planet pillar, but I would like also to mention what we do in sustainability also in other areas. So first of all, driving social impact. This means for us to of course to push more on the let's say, of course, on the ESG topic, but more, let's say, on the social aspects of sustainability. So we really partner with clients in order, let's say, to promote social sustainability, and at the same time, of course, to make sustainability their competitive advantage. Because in the very end, as I said at the beginning, to us, let's say, our purpose is really to make sure that our partners are, let's say, are going to advance the world. And so that's of course our main goal. We're going to focus, and I will, of course, tell you more on protecting our planet later, but let me also share the 3rd pillar that for us is empowering our people. And I already, let's say, shared with you let's say, how diverse our people are, from, let's say, all the aspects you can imagine. And our purpose here is to really make sure that let's say, BCG is as inclusive as possible. And so, let's say, no matter your background, no matter your gender, your ethnicity, your religion, we really, let's say, there is a place for everyone in BCG. And so, let's say, this pillar is really to make BCG as inclusive as possible. Last but not least, let's say the pillar called promoting responsible business for us is, of course, let's say, there is a double objective with this pillar. The first one being our people that working with our partners must, let's say, adhere to, of course, a code of conduct and some principles that for us, let's say, are of course needed in order, let's say, to partner, to be let's say, the reference partner of our customers. So this is first of all. And of course, let's say we also looking at our providers, at our supply chain, but also at our customers. We really want them to, let's say, to fulfill some key principles. And so, let's say, when we select providers, let's say we survey them and we check, let's say, for sustainability action, for example, but also before signing a contract with a potential client, we also, let's say, want to make sure that that client, let's say, has a sustainable business. So let's say we do avoid to partner, for example, with clients that for us are operating in businesses that we do not perceive and we do not believe that are sustainable for the society, to make an example. Having said that, let me maybe, and Giulia, Kate, you tell me if it is okay or not, but let me maybe pause here to check whether there are already questions, or let's say, if you want any clarification before entering specifically into the protecting our planet pillar. I don't know if you prefer now or later, but I usually prefer the session to be very interactive. So if there are questions, very happy to take them.
Fabio, can you specify what ESG means to us?
Oh, sorry. Absolutely, sorry. ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. And basically, let's say this is the framework on which sustainability is funded. So when we push the sustainability topic within our customers, we really look at all the three pillars and we make sure that, let's say, they advance the thinking on all the three pillars. That's why we differentiate, let's say, between driving social impact and protecting our planet. In the first pillar, we really push for ESG as a whole. And so, of course, we take into account environmental topics, as you can imagine. But the idea on that pillar is to push a lot also the social impact topics, meaning like, for example, work conditions, let's say welfare, training. So making sure that the people being employee or being also local communities are, let's say, are taken into account when defining a company strategy, for example. While of course on protecting our planet is really focusing on the environmental, so on the E of our ESG framework, and more specifically within environmental, actually you have plenty of topics to look at. Just imagine biodiversity, the use of water, the let's say circular economy. But when looking at protecting our planet, of course, let's say we really focus a lot on greenhouse gases emissions. That's the topic number one. Of course, it's not the only topic, as Giuseppe Falco said during your opening session, but it's definitely one of the most important topics for us to push for. Good. Any other question? Okay, let me maybe very quickly go over what we do on the protecting our planet. Actually, Caterina nicely summed up what are our let's say 3 ways to create climate impact. So the first one is the internal program we are very proud of, which is called Net Zero at BCG. So here we are really pushing new ways of working. Of course, let's say the objective is to try to reduce travel, as travel for us is really the key source of emissions. So let's say that's the objective number one is to really reduce traveling, but at the same time, of course, we need to make sure that let's say we continue to partner and we continue to provide let's say the positive impact that our clients perceive. So it's of course let's say a trade-off between let's say traveling in a more sustainable way, or let's say to avoid or to reduce traveling, but at the same time, let's say to bring impact. The second way is to support our own client to let's say to push for climate action, meaning that we partner with them and we do specific projects in order to define their climate strategy and in order to define their objectives to reduce greenhouse gases emissions. The third topic instead is shaping the global agenda, meaning that, as I said at the beginning, we do not partner just with clients, but we do a lot of, let's say, pro bono work, meaning collaborate with a set of international players that can be, I don't know, non-profit institutions, can be, let's say, also, for example, coalitions that are composed of traditional customers of us, but let's say that they decide to collaborate together in order to push climate action. And so what we do is to also engage with them in order to push the topic together. So let me enter into the first lever, so the Net Zero at BCG program. So here it's, let's say, there is a quote from our managing director and partner, Catherine Bell, who is the global responsible for this program. And what we did the last year was to announce that we will become net zero by 2030 at the latest. So let's say that we're also thinking to anticipate this target here. And of course, let's say we want to become net zero by fulfilling and by adhering to the definition provided by the Science Based Target Initiative. So to really, first of all, reduce whatever we can reduce of our emissions, and then for the remaining emissions, we are going to neutralize them. So we're of course, let's say, going to remove greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere in order to neutralize our remaining emissions at 2030. In order to do so, we have, let's say, three objectives. So the first one is to abate our scope 1 and 2, meaning our direct energy and electricity consumption emissions by 90% per FTE. And the scope 3 emissions, and here within scope 3, as I said before, the key source is coming from traveling, by 30% per FTE by 2025. So this is, let's say, our commitment, our midterm commitment on how to reduce our own emissions. Second, as I said, we're going to neutralize all the remaining emissions by 2030, meaning neutralizing by removing carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, either through nature-based solutions, so like, for example, afforestation, reforestation, but also through engineered solutions. And you may have heard of, let's say, the direct air capture technology that is really advancing a lot, and hopefully in a few years will provide, let's say, an engineered solution to really remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere in a safe and effective way. Of course, the objective is to, after 2030, to become climate positive, meaning to remove more carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere than the amount that we will emit after 2030. So that's the objective. Number 3, what we want to do is also, of course, let's say, to invest heavily, and let's say the budget here is 400 million in order, let's say, to push and to collaborate with governments and institutions on climate topics in the next 10 years. So we really want also, let's say, to support the research, for example, on climate action in order to find, let's say, more efficient and effective way to combat climate change. As you can imagine, in 2020, we already, let's say, outperformed our target. Of course, let's say that was much expected given the international context. So on the 30% reduction on scope 3, so on traveling. Of course, we were able to achieve much more, 84%. On direct energy and electricity, the target, as I said, was 90%. And this target, of course, it applies to our offices and to our company cars. And by 2020, we already achieved this objective. Of course, 2020 is not to be considered. I mean, we're not considering these two targets achieved, and then let's say we stop to push for emission reductions. This is just, let's say, what happened in 2020. But to us, most important numbers are, let's say, the key learnings from the pandemic that we summarized in this page. So first of all, we were able to really collaborate within our BCG teams in a very effective way. So let's say we implemented a lot of digital tools in order to collaborate, each one from home. And let's say very rarely we entered our offices in order to collaborate together, let's say, within the same place. So it was, I would say, 90% plus of our cases were conducted in a fully remote fashion. The learning number 2 for us is that we were able to really provide our global experts in all geographies without moving them. And to us, this is extremely important because this is, of course, the key lever to reduce traveling. As you can imagine, let's say, our previous business model was, let's say, to have, I don't know, an expert maybe based in Washington. But then since, as I said, we have, let's say, offices all over the world, maybe his expertise was needed, I don't know, in Jakarta, for example. And what happened? It was 2 years ago, not a long time ago. We used to move that expert from Washington to Jakarta whenever it was needed in order to work on person with the client. And let's say, actually, the pandemic taught us that it's really not needed because our client. Sorry, this is my son. Just a second. Okay, so he's still alive. Good. So that is a key learning to us, and let's say when in the next months, when the pandemic hopefully will end, we will of course continue to deploy our experts in this fashion without really moving them with international flights from let's say all over the world just to attend, I don't know, maybe a one-day workshop with our clients. So we will let's say make them attend the workshop on remote, also because, and this is the third learning, our clients are really satisfied of let's say our work despite being from remote. So overall, what happened during the pandemic is that our business, and we are proud of it, of course, let's say the context and the type of work we do allowed us to achieve this result. But basically, our business didn't shrink in these 2 years. So it more or less remained the same. And in some geographies, we also grew. So we are, let's say, extremely proud on how we handled the pandemic. But to us, really going forward, the learning is we can do it from remote. We can avoid a lot of traveling, and we will do it and will possibly, let's say, overperform against our own targets at 2025. Then, and let's say it's extremely important, and I know that there is a lot of discussion around this topic by, let's say, some climate experts that are, let's say, fighting against the so-called offsetting topic. But in the very end, climate science actually is in favor of offsetting all the emissions that cannot be reduced or avoided in a different way. So if we really want to become net zero, and if we want, let's say, to advance the society, and let's say to do not, let's say, completely change our way of living, then we need to also accept that in some industries there will be the so-called residual emissions, meaning that after I apply all the potential levers to reduce or to avoid the emission I'm accountable for, there will be residual emissions. And with these emissions, in order to be called net zero by the Science Based Target Initiative, I need to neutralize them. And the way to do it is to let's say, to participate to projects all over the world that can be classified as either avoided emission projects or removal projects. So as you can see from the chart above, what we are doing is to really push and increase our, let's say, our participation to removal projects. And the difference between the two is that on the avoidance project, basically you participate and you, let's say, you get a certification if you can state that you avoided, I don't know, a forest, for example, to be removed in order to be replaced, I don't know, from for example, to grow coffee, just to make a stupid example. Of course, these are good, let's say, of course, this is a good way of acting, but to us, and let's say also, I will say there is a good consensus on this, it's much better to be, let's say, to be more active on the topic, meaning that we do not want a forest to avoid that the forest is destroyed. We want to create a new forest. We want to, let's say, to restore coastland, for example. We want to do this by also pushing and, let's say, making sure that local communities benefit out of this action. So this is, let's say, the key difference between the two levers. And what we want to do in 2030 is to make sure that 100% of our offsetting projects are carbon removals projects. So that's what we are pushing for. Let me share how let's say a carbon removal project looks like. So this is one of the many that we are pushing for. In this case, we are, let's say, really working with 90,000 farmers in, let's say, in a country in East Africa, if I recall it correctly, should be, I think Kenya, if I recall it correctly. And basically with them, we are really pushing them to basically to plant new trees. So you can see the number with this project, 15 million trees have been planted and are growing in order, let's say, to really remove carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. And the impact is that mainly 42,000 tons of carbon dioxide per year are, let's say, are removed out of the atmosphere. And as you can imagine, this impact will last roughly 50 years. So that's it's a massive impact, and we really want to push this type of projects also because, as you can see below, we are not just pushing for climate actions, but we are also, let's say, helping local communities advancing. So that's these are the other benefits you can see. You can see the SDGs here that this type of projects are enabling. So this is our net zero program, which let's say I'm proud to be part of, as let's say I'm the responsible for the program in our system. So Italy, Greece, Turkey, and Israel. Let me maybe again stop here, and if you have any question, please ask.
I had a question, kind of like when here you were working with a community. Who do you go through? Do you go through like the government of the country, or do you go through the region, like more on a regional scale? How does that work? It is a very good question. It really depends on the country you go to. So it can be, let's say, the central government. It can be, let's say, a local government. In some cases, you really go directly and collaborate with the local community. So really at a very small scale level. Of course, this is, yes, a function of the country you go to, and also a function of, let's say, the project and the ambition you have. Because, let's say, there are some projects that can be, let's say, very small scale, meaning, I don't know, thousands of trees, for example. There are some others that are, let's say, really huge, and we will see huge projects coming live in the next years, as this is a very hot topic all over the industries. And so in these cases, you mainly go through to the central government. Lot of questions. I cannot see the name. I see, Philip maybe is the next in line.
Okay, so I have a question connected with the consulting of your firm company. I'm just interested, is there a trend among the new companies to maybe apply and net zero policies within them? And is there a difference between the old companies, well-known big companies, and the new one? Do the old companies are less prone to implement such policies? And what is the overall trend within the companies on the market?
That's a very good question. Maybe, Philip, if you do not mind, I will take it in the second, let's say, in the next chapter, because the next chapter is really, let's say, focusing on this topic.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Carl, next in line.
Hi, I had a more practical organizational question like to you, because I have also been managing an organization that was outsourcing this, okay, please calculate our emissions and let's buy some trees to make them fair. Do you in Boston Consulting Group have this, do this internally? Like, do you have a specific department for calculating your emissions and then deciding on which projects to finance, or do you outsource this work to other companies?
So we have, I would say we have both. So we have an internal department, which is called the Global Internal Sustainability Team, that is based, if I recall it correctly, in London, but let's say they do have team members from all over the world. And basically, they do manage our, let's say, they do. I would say the first and most important action from them is to, of course, to advance our sustainability report, and then, of course, let's say this means that they are responsible for all the topics that are part of our sustainability report, particularly on the two objects that you mentioned. I would say on the carbon footprint, we do have a model that let's say takes into account all our internal data and provide and basically compute our carbon footprint. But then we have an external certification entity that goes through our model and checks whether, let's say, the model is consistent and whether, let's say, the data that are used are okay, and basically they certify our carbon footprint. On the offsetting, on the carbon offsetting projects, we do partner with third parties, so we do not go directly, let's say, and develop projects by our own, but let's say we do partner with the so-called project developers, and this is, let's say, a type of maybe you are very well aware of, since you mentioned that you have some experience in this. So we do partner with them, and also we involve in our projects other partners as well. As you can imagine, 15 million trees, it's really a huge number. And so, let's say, we usually, let's say, of course, have a project developer that is, let's say, handling and orchestrating the project, and then we of course participate together with other stakeholders. What we do is, of course, to select. That's to us is the most important, to make sure that our investment go to the right projects. So that's, of course, the work of our internal team. Good. Juliana.
I have a question regarding the kind of internationality that BCG has, because I can see that you are in countries that are like either super developed or underdeveloped. How does the company itself like work, taking into consideration that the problem that a country might be facing within sustainability is not the same as another country?
That's a very interesting question. So let me, as you highlighted, let me maybe go very quickly here. As you said, we are spread all over the world, but we do not cover all the world countries. And as you correctly said, sustainability is, let's say, is a super strong and very important topic, in particular, let's say, in Southeast Asia. As you can see, we are not covering all the countries, Africa and South America. But let me say that what we do is, of course, let's say, to work with companies that do have activities in these countries, and we are, let's say, supporting them to achieve sustainability into, let's say, countries yet to develop at the same level as, let's say, Europe or North America. So that's how we achieve sustainability indirectly, so without having maybe a direct presence with an office in those countries, but let's say through our clients. And also, let me mention that in some cases, of course, it depends, it is on a project by project case, but what we do is if a project, I don't know, is focusing on a very specific country and we do not have an office in that country, we do look for, let's say, local partners in order, let's say, to complement our knowledge with local knowledge whenever we feel this is needed. Good. Thanks a lot for the question. Super interesting, all of them. Let me maybe move to the second topic, and here I will take the outstanding question on, let's say, what the industries are doing around climate action. So as I said, we have created, and this is particularly, let's say, meant for client work, but also, of course, for, let's say, collaborating with institutions. So we created this center that is called Climate and Sustainability Center. We launched it in 2019, And of course, let's say really our key objective is to drive technological and economic transformations to realize competitive advantage in a low carbon economy. As you see, the competitive advantage, let's say, sentence is always there because, let's say, that's our purpose. But the idea is, let's say, to really partner with clients and to push for new technologies or for transformations in order to make them competitive in a new world. What we did in 2020 was to run roughly 400 projects all over the world with 300 clients, meaning that for some clients we did more than one project. And let me maybe describe very quickly a project, let's say a typical project we do, and then let's go back to the question from, if I recall it correctly, from Philip, right? Good. So on this case, we partner with a premium car manufacturer to really define their climate strategy. So of course, in this case, but also in all the other cases I recall on this topic, the client was already doing something, let's say, linked to climate action. But usually we find a situation in which, let's say, the effort is scattered around the companies, and so there is not a unique strategy to push for climate action. What we did with them was to define, let's say, a comprehensive climate strategy that is compatible, that is, let's say, in line with the Paris Agreement. And particularly what we did with them was to really focus not only on their own emissions, because as you can imagine, yes, they have huge factories, but their, let's say, their direct emissions are not so important as compared to the emissions of their suppliers. And by their suppliers, I mean, like, for example, the steel industry, for example, that is a huge emitter. So what we did with them was, let's say, to agree and to work on 4 milestones. So the first one was, of course, to define targets that were consistent with the Paris Agreement. And also in this case, we got them approved by the Science Based Target Initiative. Then what we did was to, let's say, not only define the ambition, because a lot of companies in the past years or months have defined, let's say, very impressive reduction targets, but very often they fail in communicating how they want to achieve those targets. And to us, the how to get there is something, let's say, super important. And I will say that this is becoming more and more true also, let's say, particularly within the investor community, meaning that if you declare, let's say, targets and the investor community perceives that those targets are not achievable, then you are punished by the markets. So that's something to take into account when defining a climate strategy. So we really work with them, and we define a set of levers that, let's say, summed up together, allow our client to achieve the ambition. Third, and very important to us, is to find ways so that the organization is really, let's say, pushing to achieve those targets. And particularly, of course, in the very end, as happens quite often, it's a matter of money. So let's say incentivize or do not provide bonuses, and let's say set the way you really remunerate your employees in line with your strategy is one of the key levers. Sorry if I am too blunt, too naive, but this is what we observed so far. So it's really one of the key levers to achieve the objective of a strategy, in particular in this case of the climate strategy. It's also very important when looking at climate action, also to change corporate processes in order, let's say, to make them compliant with the climate strategy. Particularly, it's extremely important to take investment decisions by looking at the impact that, let's say, the greenhouse gases emissions will have on that project you are going to invest into. And particularly, this is not linked to, I don't know, like for example, if you have operations in Europe, it's not linked just to looking at the emission trading system, which is, let's say, the way Europe is reducing carbon dioxide emission in let's say, in the most emitting sectors, but it's really a matter of defining a level, let's say a price for carbon dioxide that is going to take into account also, let's say, the social impact that carbon dioxide will have in the very long term. So particularly, let's say, not only let's say the taxes or the certifications you need to pay, but really, let's say, the impact of that carbon dioxide to the society and to, let's say, to the growth of the society in the next 20, 30, 40 years. By looking at projects with this lens, you are able really to take a more accurate investment decision and to avoid in the short, medium term to invest in something that will let's say, will harm the planet in the coming decades. So that's super important, as well as I said, incentives are super important to achieve climate ambition. Then, last but not least, what I shared with you before on the offsetting strategy, of course, was something that we did also for with them. So basically, we let's say we provided them the guidelines to really.
I'm sorry, it was me, my mistake, sorry.
No worries, no worries. I was saying on this last bullet, we really supported them in setting up a department to pick up the right offsetting projects. So having said that, this is, let's say, of course, one of the typical projects we do with clients. But let me answer to the question from Philip, which is not an easy question to answer to. But let me say the following. Of course, sustainability and climate action is happening in all the industries. What we observed, and let's say what we also, let's say, of course, analyze in order to show to our clients how important sustainability is that companies that are performing extremely well on sustainability, and by this I mean that we have, let's say, a set of raters, like for example, Refinitiv is one of them, but there are many others that, let's say, provide scores on the sustainability levers. And what we observe is that companies that are scoring extremely well on these pillars, particularly those that are in the first quintile compared to the peers within the same industry. So let's say looking at the industry by industry, we do find a correlation between ESG scoring and company scoring, meaning, for example, profit margin or valuation multiples. So it's not, I mean, it's happening everywhere, and companies that are acting are benefiting from it also from an economical perspective. So it's not just a matter of really, let's say, protecting our planet or providing social impact. It's also a matter of, let's say, competitive advantage of those companies. So I do not see, I do not see any industry that is not acting, particularly, let's say, maybe a lot of, let's say, of people are saying that the oil and gas industry is not acting, to mention one, but they are acting actually. I mean, it's, of course, it's not something that you can switch from one day to the other. It's, let's say, it's like a huge boat that, let's say, that they start to steer, but you will see the steering after, let's say, a few possibly, let's say, a few 100 meters, if not more. So the same is there, and I would say the same is happening in all the industries. Of course, not all the players are acting, but what we are suggesting with our work is that if you act, you get a competitive advantage over your peers. Then let me also, because you said another very interesting sentence around, let's say, newcomers, so new companies. Of course, what we observed is that there are newcomers that are disrupting industrial sectors. I mean, just let's think about, I don't know, Tesla, for example. But let me say also that incumbents, when they move extremely well, they are able to perform in line with the best-in-class newcomers. Like, for example, as we said at the beginning, I'm particularly, let's say, looking at the energy sector. So there is a refiner from the Nordics that is called Neste. Basically, their traditional business was to do oil refining, so to take oil and transform it into oil products, so gasoline or, let's say, kerosene and so on. What they did was to really transform their business and to start producing only sustainable biofuels. And by sustainable biofuels, I really mean, let's say, the most advanced biofuels you can find on the market. And if you look at their performance in terms of, let's say, value creation for their shareholders, the performance is in line with what Tesla achieved in the past. So it's a huge performance. So it's I mean, it's, of course, I mean, you can disrupt the market by being a newcomer, but if you can be a champion in your business or in a similar business, also by, of course, let's say, setting, let's say, a very disruptive strategy. So this is what particularly Neste did in the oil refining sector, but there are also some other examples that we can comment if you want.
Thank you very much for the answer. Thank you.
Good. I see another question.
Yes, thank you for the word, Mr. Cancarè, and thank you for the interesting presentation as far. I'm Isaac. My question is basically this. So as a young entrepreneur and a business owner myself, I feel like it's hard for smaller companies to find the margins needed to make a more sustainable business model. Do you think that a grassroots campaign of the smaller companies are more needed, or should the bigger companies compensate to make sure that the economy gets more sustainable?
I think that the effort should come from every company, from the smallest one to the biggest one. And so to me, this is, let's say, the short answer to your question. But let me maybe articulate a little bit more, and let me also maybe remind what my let's say, the CEO of my company said that you're opening a session. It's really something that starts from the single person. So I mean, each person should push sustainability by, I don't know, taking into account sustainability when you need to buy something, by choosing the company you are working for, by, I don't know, of course, let's say, your vote right. So these are, let's say, actions that a single person can do. then let's say the smallest company, even let's say even if extremely tiny, I mean, it should not see investing in sustainability as a cost, but should really see it as, let's say, as an opportunity, because if you do that and if you differentiate, even if you are small, if you take into account that the community is going to look for sustainability, then you will win. So that's, I mean, that's to me the answer, particularly to you. So let's say my invite is really to push, because I mean you can really make the difference if your company is, let's say, and if you want to let's say to continue. I will not ask about your company, but I mean I see two scenarios.
You can ask if you want.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So I own an.
Go.
I'm sorry. I own a knife sharpening company in Stockholm, Sweden. So we don't do anything really. We don't produce stuff. We just move around. And the small thing that you said that we could change is like going by bike instead of sometimes we go by car. And maybe we could use recyclable paper instead of just normal paper when we package the knives, and perhaps used how to say, sustainable electricity in our homes or in our office. So yeah.
Good. Thank you. And you can buy sustainable steel.
Oh, we don't produce knives. We just sharpen them.
Ah, you just sharpen. You can buy, I don't know, sustainable tools. You can. Yeah. I mean, it's. I mean, I see that you already, let's say, identified the key levers on your, let's say, direct business. But maybe you can also think about a little bit, let's say, about your providers, because I imagine, well, you said about something about the packaging, but I really think 360 about your suppliers. Make sure that they are super sustainable and market the sustainability of your company.
I was going to ask a follow-up question. So regarding what you just said, do you think that we should choose customers based on if they are climate neutral?
Customer is hard. Suppliers is easy. Customers, yeah, okay. I mean, it's
sometimes
it's not easy.
Yeah, sometimes we go to different restaurants or some like supermarkets and stuff, and I feel like it would be hard if we could only select those who are very climate conscious.
Yeah, no, let me be, I mean, I do not want to be idealistic. I mean, it's super hard to say, no, look, I'm not going to sell.
Yeah, of course.
But let's say on suppliers, that's something you can really do. And then you should really, I mean, do good marketing of let's say, your choices, because maybe then your clients will select you and not somebody else, given your, let's say, your actions there.
Of course, yeah.
And so basically, good. Thanks for sharing. So that's very interesting, and it's a long-term business. But then I was also imagining, let's say, wherever maybe you are part of a startup, and maybe somebody of you is part of a startup. Let's say startups in this topic, to me, are going to win in let's say, and given that there is a huge amount of new ideas, of new thinking on climate. Let's say if you really want to, let's say, to steer your startup and to create a new startup, look at climate action, because I really believe that you can do great things, and you can also, I mean, get good, extremely nice rewards out of your effort. Good. Any other question on let's say on what we do for companies? Otherwise, I will move, let's say, to the work we do to really shape the climate agenda. Okay, good. Let me move to this page, which we are extremely proud of. So we, as I said at the beginning, we are collaborating with plenty of organizations and institutions around the world to push climate action. So one of our key and long-term collaboration is with the World Economic Forum. Particularly with them, we created the Net Zero Challenge. We'll tell you something more about this in the coming page. We are the advisor, a chief advisor to the CEO Alliance of Climate Leaders. So basically, we are really collaborating with the CEO around the world that are committed to climate action, and we are, let's say, on the Global Future Council on Net Zero Transition. So basically, with the World Economic Forums, we're really working on multiple topics. We are extremely proud of being the knowledge partner for COP26. So let's say we're supporting them, providing our knowledge on climate, so that, let's say, COP26 will deliver, let's say, the most as much as possible out of the participants. We are partner of TED Countdown, which is, let's say, a very interesting and dedicated TED spin-off dedicated to climate action, and you will see something, if I recall it correctly, something that will materialize particularly by this October. So stay tuned on this topic. We are a member of the World Business Council on Sustainable Development. So let's say we are shaping with them and supporting them in preparing different reports around the sustainability topics, particularly, let's say, on circular economy, and we did, let's say, an extensive work with them in the past months. We do partner with national institutions, and these can be, I don't know, governments, but they can be like, for example, for the BDI example, they can be associations covering all the industrial sectors within a specific country. And with them, we define and we devise net zero programs for their affiliates, or let's say for the scope they are covering. Then we do partner with industry initiatives, meaning that our maybe traditional customers, they create an initiative to fight climate change, and we do partner with them in order to support them in setting the right targets. Like, for example, on the oil and gas climate initiative, we support that I think most of the oil and gas companies in defining industry-wide target to reduce emissions on the sector. Last but not least, we collaborate, of course, with a number of target setting and reporting organizations. And so when we partner with our customers, we, of course, let's say, push them to disclose their performance, first of all, but also, let's say, to make sure that the targets are certified by, let's say, a third party. I mentioned before science-based target because we believe it's let's say, it's a key actor that, let's say, we really contribute a lot to make sure that companies will go to net zero very soon. So this is just to provide you an overview of our activities, but let me maybe zoom in into what we do for the World Economic Forum. Particularly, what we did in 2020 was to define the so-called Net Zero Challenge. And so basically, with this Net Zero Challenge, we showed to a number of companies, and you can see some examples on the right, and we discussed with them, and let's say we summarize the findings, that it's really possible to go net zero. So that was, of course, the key finding of that topic. Of course, it's a challenge, but we believe that it will have, let's say, very interesting returns for companies that will apply to this net zero challenge. More recently, and it's really a matter of a few weeks ago, we worked on another topic with them, that is the so-called, let's say, supply chain decarbonization. As I said, it's extremely important to decarbonize your direct emissions, but it's extremely important as well to look at your suppliers and to make sure that you pick up the most sustainable suppliers. So this is, let's say, the new report we prepare together with the World Economic Forum, and basically, let's say, the report is really inviting all the companies to look at this issue and to make sure that in the short and medium term they set up systems to really select suppliers by looking at their sustainability. So this is, let's say, in a nutshell what we did. I see there is a question from Caterina.
Yes, I'll ask it, and then if you want to redirect it to later, no problem. So I was wondering, I think that the topic of sustainability has started to gain so much momentum, especially because the private sector has started to get so much engaged in becoming like the actors of this change. And having you the chance to deal with so many companies and firms, I was wondering, are they receiving a lack of support from the government? Where is the gap there? Like, is there something that governments, institutions are not doing to facilitate the role of the private sector? Because, and here I go back to something that we've spoken about before, which is the connection between the scalability of innovation and the sustainable transformation. And what can guarantee scalability of innovations is profitability. So that's why it's so important for the private sector to be able to deliver this change. So my question is, once again, where is the government and the institutions surrounding our private sectors, where are they lacking, and what do they need to do to support them more?
Well, I think we could discuss hours on this question. Let me very quickly summarize what companies need in order to implement sustainable transformations. So, well, first of all, they need funding, and these can come from investors as well as from governments. So that's why I wanted to highlight it. Then they need, let's say, let me call them, and sorry if maybe I'm too naive, they need the rules. And by rules, I also mean signals that are going to push them in the right direction. So that's something that is missing. And then there is maybe still, let's say, within the broad bucket of rules, but they also need mechanism to enable and to let's say to make the sustainable transformation possible. So these are the three things I would say they really need. Let me not comment the first one on money. I mean, of course, it's a super complex topic, but as you have seen, Europe committed, let's say, a lot of funding on the green transition. US is following, as you discussed during the opening session, and there are, let's say, good ambition also, let's say, from China, for example, and that hopefully will translate into funding to make a sustainable transformation available. Let me maybe focus a little bit more on the two other aspects, because I believe that first of all on rules and on signals, I still believe that there are still, let's say, low signals to really move, let's say, to really, let's say, convince companies to act. Like, for example, in Europe, yes, we have, as I said, the emission trading system that is, let's say, pushing for to reduce emissions, but yet let's say the price, which is now roughly around 40 euro per tons of CO2 equivalent, is not enough to make a major climate action there. Second, this mechanism is not covering all the industrial sectors, and so some sectors are basically not covered by this mechanism, and so they are of course less pushed toward climate action. And then there are, yes, some mechanism, because of course in this way you are targeting just the direct emissions happening in Europe in this specific case, and yet there are no mechanisms that are targeting, I don't know, emissions happening elsewhere. For example, those of suppliers or those of, I don't know, producers that have, let's say, factories in other systems, and they do not pay, I don't know, a carbon tax, for example, but they are allowed, let's say, to sell their products that maybe are extremely, let's say, with a very high carbon footprint in, let's say, in countries in which have rules to limit carbon emissions. And so still that we are missing some mechanisms that let's say, that create a global stimulus to really go for climate action. And then third, but I mean, it's let's say, it's extremely relevant as well, is you also need to make sure that companies willing to act can act fast. Let me describe you the let's say an example linked to Italy. In Italy, we have a key issue on authorizing renewable plants, meaning plants to produce renewable electricity. It's, I mean, it's really the process that you need to go through. That is going to take years to really, let's say, to move from thinking about, I don't know, a wind farm to making the wind farm. So if you are a company and I don't know, if you want to invest hundreds of millions in renewable electricity because you see it as the future, but then in order to get the permit to create a wind farm, you need to wait 7 years, and 7 years is not a random number, is more or less what's happening in some regions in Italy, then, I mean, it's extremely hard to really transform and let's say to really move from fossil fuels to renewables. So this is, let's say, just to introduce something that they can do, but of course it's not limited to this. I mean, we can discuss a lot more about, let's say, I don't know, labeling products, let's say, to highlight their carbon footprint. I mean, there are really a lot of, let's say, things that governments can do, but I mean, these to me are, let's say, the three categories, the three most important categories. Good. I think we have still some, I don't know, do we have still some more minutes?
Yes, 15 minutes.
So if we have still 15 minutes, I would like to show you, because of course I can describe to you the work we did in the past weeks with the World Economic Forum, but actually a colleague of mine, Jens, basically summed up this work in a TED talk that, let's say, has received a lot of attention. And so I would like really to share with you this TED talk, because to me these, let's say, are 10 minutes invested into something that is really eye-opening. So I would like to end, let's say, the workshop, and of course, let's say, to take your final questions by showing you this video from my colleague. Hopefully you will hear the audio. Let me know if it is not so.
does it work?
This is a lump of coal. It was mined a while ago in the Ruhr region of Germany, about 50 miles from where I grew up. As coal goes, it's actually quite high-end. It's very dry, has a high share of carbon in it. Both those things mean you can't only burn it to produce power and heat, but you can use it to make steel. Now, why am I telling you this? By the end of this talk, I want to have convinced you that we can make a huge step forward in the great fight against climate change by just spending 1 to 2% more on things that we buy. And the path of this coal is going to help me with that. But back to steel. What you have to know about steel making is that it's a humblingly brutal process. You have these huge furnaces that tear apart and recombine elements and materials that have literally been around for millions of years at temperatures of up to more than 2000 degrees Celsius. It's a triumph of industrialization, but it's terrible for the climate. More than 5% of all man-made emissions currently come from making steel. And of all the many challenges we face to save the climate, this one's particularly hard to solve. Now, why is that? The first reason is technical. There are technologies to produce low-carbon steel. We can, for example, capture the CO2 and pump it back under the earth. It's called carbon capture and storage. Or we can move to entirely new processes that, for example, run on low-carbon hydrogen instead of coal. But all of these are currently only at a piloting stage. The second reason is economical. This is likely going to be expensive. And to illustrate that, let's compare the steel challenge to that of companies in other sectors. If you're in, say, manufacturing, most of your emissions come from the power you consume for things like conveyor belts, robots, drives, and so on. You can eliminate them by switching to renewables, which isn't that expensive anymore. In most cases, this won't cost you more than 10 euros per ton of CO2. Probably a lot less. Other companies have more energy-intensive processes that require a lot of heat to operate. They generate more emissions by burning fossil fuels directly, and it's more expensive to get rid of. Now let's assume across all of their processes, it costs them on average 5 times as much, somewhere between 40 and 50 euros per ton of CO2. Now, if a steel company wants to move to zero emissions, he either needs to invest significantly into upgrading all of his current plants and into infrastructure that transports CO2 from its plants to a storage site, or he needs to close all its plants and build entirely new ones that, for example, run on low-carbon hydrogen. According to industry studies, this can cost them 10 times as much, in the ballpark of 100 euros per ton of CO2. And the costs for a ton of steel could increase by as much as 50%. Now, to make matters even worse, our steel company operates in a commodity business. He almost exclusively competes on price. And he has shitty margins already. That means for him saving CO2 is expensive, but his profit per ton of CO2 is very low. And this puts him in the uncomfortable company of only a few other sectors, the so-called hard-to-abate sectors club. Those are industries like cement and chemicals that have equally messy industrial processes and require very high temperatures to operate. Or aviation and shipping that need to invest a lot of energy to move very large and heavy objects over longer distances. And hard-to-abate sectors are one of the larger dilemmas of international climate action, because discussions around decarbonization usually go roughly like this, where the activist says, your emissions are harming the planet and threatening humanity. You need to change immediately. And the company answers, I know, but if I invest in low-carbon technologies and the next guy doesn't, I will be more expensive and go out of business. That won't help the climate. So first I need a level playing field. Both understandable positions, but bringing down emissions is kind of urgent, and a global level playing field in which, say, all countries agree on one mutual price for carbon emissions probably won't materialize anymore in my lifetime. So this is where the discussions usually reach a stalemate and where my talk would therefore end. But would it end here? I hadn't been invited to hold it. And I already promised you that saving the planet does not have to break the bank. So let's maybe follow the path of our lump of coal just a little further. The last time we left it, it had helped make steel, which climate impact notwithstanding is one of the key building blocks in our economies. It's in many, many things, from huge structures to everyday household items like refrigerators or washing machines. We use it to build wind turbines, which we need to save emissions in the power sector. And we use it to build our cars, which is the part of the journey I'd like us to follow next. Now, in today's typical car, steel can be found in many, many different parts. You can assume that an average European mid-sized sedan with a 30,000 euro price tag contains about 1 ton of it. To produce 1 ton of steel, in Europe generates a bit less than 2 tons of carbon emissions. In other countries like China, it's a bit more, so let's round to 2. Now, we've learned earlier that moving to low carbon steel can increase its costs by as much as 50%. If history tells us anything, then these costs will likely decrease over the long run, if humans truly put their mind, their muscle, their money behind it. But for the sake of this argument, let's stick to these costs, plus 50%. In the case of our European mid-sized sedan, this translates into, wait for it, 200 euros. Wait, that can't be right. That's not even a percent of final sales value. Well, let's do the math. If you spend 30,000 euros for a car, what are you actually paying for? Well, first of all, the car company needs to make money. So the first 20% are for his margin, for marketing, the whole sales organization, overhead, and so on. The car has to be assembled. Another 20% go to production. First, the parts in the car have to be assembled. 40% go to suppliers. In this whole process, many things need to be moved from A to B and back, so more goes to transportation. Now, only 15% of the price of the car is actually for the materials in it. Things like the battery, aluminum, plastics, glass, and 2% for the steel. This means that materials that make up 90% of a car's emission footprint by the time that I can buy it in the dealership make up only 15% of its costs. And it means that even the car company has to pay 50% more for the steel in a car. This only translates into a very small markup on my final sales price. Now, you rightly argue that steel isn't the only thing creating emissions in a car. And that's of course correct. So we did the math for all other commodities and processes as well. And it turns out building a 30,000 euro car out of exclusively carbon neutral materials will only increase its price to 30,500 euros. Only 500 euros extra. That's less than 2% more. Buying that same car in sunset red instead of black would cost me 700 euros extra. Fancier rims, 1,000 euros extra. Leather seats, 2,000 euros extra. You get the picture. So let's imagine that same discussion we've had earlier, but with a car producer in the middle, where the activist says, your emissions are harming the planet and threatening humanity. You need to change immediately. And now the car producer answers, I know, but if I invest in low carbon materials and the next guy doesn't, my car will be 2% more expensive. Wait, my customers might actually pay that. And I can market all my cars as carbon neutral. Steel producer, your steel is creating too many emissions in my car. You have to change immediately. I can make low carbon steel for you, but it will be more expensive. How much more expensive? And now we at least have a dialogue. Almost everything about the way we currently live currently contributes to global warming. Most of the things we buy come with a heavy emissions backpack that few of us are really aware of. What I want you to understand is that we can eliminate a lot of these emissions by just spending 1 to 2% more on things that we buy. We've learned what it would cost to produce a carbon neutral car. So how about a carbon neutral smartphone? 3 euros extra. That's 13 cents a month on a 2-year plan. A carbon neutral pair of jeans, 60 to 70 cents extra. Even building a house out of carbon neutral materials would only increase its costs by 2 to 3%, and even less in good locations. There are 6 supply chains that are responsible for almost half of all global emissions that we can impact directly through our purchasing decisions. Those are things like food, construction, fashion, consumer goods, electronics, and of course automotive. And just like in the car example, materials make up only a fraction of the final sales price in most of them. Addressing these emissions could be a huge step forward for international climate action. It would enable customer-facing companies that can benefit from marketing carbon-neutral products to address a multiple of their direct emissions footprint. And many of these emissions are in sectors like steel that can't shoulder the costs on their own. Some are in countries that don't yet regulate emissions aggressively enough. Take the trucks I'm wearing now. Me being willing to spend 2% more on them could have reduced their production emissions in China. Now, I'm well aware that not everyone can easily afford to spend these 2% extra, but we have to be aware that the economic consequences let alone the human ones, of not spending this money would be far, far worse. We have to move to net zero. Fairly distributing the costs of this is one of the many challenges that we as a society will need to deal with. I'm also not saying that this will be easy. Understanding supply chain emissions is unbelievably cumbersome. Engaging with suppliers to address them takes a lot of effort. What we would argue is that for many companies, the chance to market a truly carbon neutral product at just a 1 to 2% higher price should be well worth this effort. Just imagine you stood in a store. You had two brands of the same product in front of you. One is carbon neutral, it costs 2% more. Which of these two products would you rather buy? Imagine you had the chance to work for either one of these two companies. Who would you rather work for? Imagine you were an investor. On which of these two companies would you bet your money? Which of these two do you think will be more successful in the long run? To solve the climate crisis, there's still a lot we need to figure out. There are many challenges we need to overcome. But economics don't have to be one of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Fabio, so much. This was very, very insightful.
And thank you to you for all the very interesting questions.
We have to all rush off in the other room. I'm sorry we didn't have a few minutes to conclude. I'm sure that everybody would have liked to thank you for your time and for really the special information that you passed on and the insights that I'm sure we're going to keep in mind in the next days. So thank you so much. And now let's all move to the general because we're the last group and they're waiting for us.
Please take a screenshot.
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 Was it
let's
what
do
you
it.
were going to ask, Erwin? No, okay, no. Okay, can everyone turn their cameras on? I mean, if you feel like doing that, please.
I think, Juliana, we're just so late that they're going to kill us if we don't go right away. I'm sorry. We'll take a video from a screenshot from the video, okay?
Okay.
Thank you so